Hello, Bleacher Report listeners. My name is James Hill. I run the YouTube channel MrBucsNation, where we talk about all things Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And in this live stream today here on the Bleacher Report app, we're going to be talking about the future of Todd Bowles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as a whole. I want to take a look at both the short-term future and the long-term future because I feel like both are important following the Bucs' recent loss to the San Francisco 49ers just yesterday. It was a semi-close game towards the end where the Buccaneers certainly made it interesting in some situations, but ultimately Tampa Bay could not come away with a win. So that does first ask the question, what is the immediate future of the Bucs and Todd Bowles more so in this situation? So let's go ahead and take a quick look at it. Firstly, you take a look at the overall score. You take a look at the game. And this was certainly a game that the Buccaneers could have won, right? It was a winnable game. And I know some people are going to say, well, come on. Now, technically, all games are winnable, right? And I do agree with that. But this one certainly got away from the Bucs. It was a situation where overall, it was just the team didn't play well enough in all aspects, right? The offense didn't do well enough. The defense didn't do well enough. They tried to make a late game comeback. They just had too many errors, a couple of drop touchdowns here, a couple of bad passes there, a couple of big plays given up by the defense. Just everything that, they needed to happen to win. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers just didn't get done. Overall efficiency, overall everything that could have happened or that the team wanted to happen just didn't happen and resulted in them losing, right? Now, I will say this. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers right now are at a 4-6 record. It's not great, but in the overall scheme of things, whenever you look at it as a whole, right now the Buccaneers are still only one game back in the division. What happens next week? Well, the New Orleans Saints and the Atlanta Falcons, both teams that are ahead of the Bucs right now, play each other. That is great news for the Bucs. I mean, absolutely great news, all things considered, because the Bucs are still in this divisional race. Only one game back. If the Falcons win and the Bucs win next week, then you have a situation where the Bucs are still very much competing for the NFC South. And that's going to be something worth paying attention to. So whenever I look at the immediate future, right, it isn't more so about whether or not Todd Bowles should be fired or not right now. I know that is going to be a debate. We're even taking a look at the chat here, and you see some people saying, hey, get rid of Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles needs to be gone right now. The fact of the matter is, folks, that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have never fired a head coach midseason. I don't think they're going to be starting right now. But what does need to start happening is the Bucs need to start winning games. They need to. They play the Indianapolis Colts this upcoming week. After that, you've got the Carolina Panthers, the Atlanta Falcons, the Green Bay Packers. Those are your next 4 games, right? Ideally, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers go 3-1 in those next 4 games. I don't think that's a stretch, including a win versus the Atlanta Falcons would definitely help them a lot. But in terms of the immediate future, it involves winning games. I'm going to be completely honest with that. They've got to start winning games. Otherwise, things can certainly get ugly real quick, right? And this is still a team that is scrapping. This is still a team that is fighting, that I don't think has lost confidence in themselves, so to speak, nor has lost confidence in their head coach. I will say that. That is what the immediate future holds, is you need to start winning games. Otherwise, 1, this division is long gone, and 2, the coaching staff's probably going to be long gone too. If things start to get ugly, if things start to really degrade in terms of this team's overall performance, in terms of the team's overall record, it's already not a great look, right? The Bucs have lost 5 out of their last 6 games. So you got to start getting stuff in the win column. You got to start really, really putting some wins together and really starting to make an immediate impact if you are Todd Bowles and getting those immediate wins to get back into that NFC South divisional race that you are still in right now, by the way, but you need to start winning games. Whenever you take a look at how that can be done, right, it takes winning the winnable games, right? A lot of people expected and knew that the San Francisco 49ers game was going to be rough. Everybody expected that. But as we've talked about in previous segments here on Bleacher Report, I'm going to do it again just to kind of go through the importance of the games. You take a look at the Indianapolis Colts game. That's in week 12 on November 26th. You take a look at the Carolina Panthers game, the Atlanta Falcons game, the Green Bay Packers game, the New Orleans Saints game, and the Carolina Panthers again. These 6 games are what needs to be the immediate future of the Bucs, right? And obviously, I know everybody talks about, well, only focus on the next week. Yeah, that's for the players and the coaches, right? From an analytical standpoint, these next 6 weeks matter so much for the immediate future of the Bucs here, right? And that's going to shape, in my opinion, the long-term future of this team is what happens in those 6 games in the immediate future. That's going to shape the long-term future here. Because a lot of different things can go a lot of different ways depending on how the remainder of these 6 games specifically end up, right? If you win majority of them, let's say you win 4 out of the 6. You end the year 8-9, right? I think that's enough for Todd Bowles to keep his job. If you win 3 of them and go 7-10, I still think that's enough for Todd Bowles to keep his job. Some people may disagree with that. Some people may not like that answer. That's just genuinely what I feel like the situation is, just from reading the tea leaves, just from looking at that situation. That's the way I feel. So the Bucs, they need to win at least half of these games, I would say, for Todd Bowles to have a legitimate chance to keep his job. If he goes pretty bad down the stretch, only winning 2 out of these 6 and not winning versus the Jaguars, it's not even including the Jaguars game, by the way. But if they finish with 6 wins, 5 wins, something like that, it's not looking great. It's not looking great for the Todd Bowles situation. I'm going to be completely honest with that. However, they can win maybe half of these 6 games, get at least to a 7-10 record, I think there's a pretty decent chance that Todd Bowles would keep his job. And then you start talking about the long-term future. So let's go through both scenarios, right? Let's go through both scenarios. First, let's talk about the long-term future of what happens if they don't end the year well. Let's say they finish with 5 wins. Let's say they finish with 4 wins or something along those lines and Todd Bowles gets fired, right? What happens in that situation? Well, obviously, I would think that the coaching staff would be gone. And then you would have to start looking at new candidates. Who are some interesting candidates that are out there? The first guy I want to talk about is a guy the Buccaneers are probably very familiar with this year. That is Detroit Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson. I love this guy. He's a very good offensive coordinator, 37 years old. You see where the Detroit Lions are this year, looking in terms of the overall offense that they have in Detroit, and things have been going pretty well, right? In terms of offensive yards, they're in the top 5 the past 2 years. In terms of rushing offense, top half. Passing offense, top half. Scoring offense, they're still looking great. Like, they're in the top half. Top 5 almost in both years. This would be a guy that I think that would make an excellent head coaching candidate, in my opinion. A guy that would definitely get a lot of interest from around the league. Definitely a guy that could give you a lot of good offensive ability, right? Young enough, so he fits that mold of what you want to see in a modern day offensive coach, a modern day guy, in terms of just being a guy who can create an innovative offense. That would be one guy to be considered. Another guy that I think would be a very interesting option is actually somebody who's already on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers team. And I know this may be a bit of a hot take given where the offense is right now for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but I want to take a look at Bucs OC Dave Canales. And people are going to say, well, if the offense isn't good, then why the heck should we expect a good thing from a head coach, from Dave Canales as a head coach, right? For me, I think that you don't necessarily need to be an offensive guru or defensive guru to be a good head coach. Todd Bowles is a fantastic defensive coordinator, and a lot of people are split on him as a head coach. Josh McDaniels, I think, is a great offensive coordinator. He was not a good head coach. Cliff Kingsbury, I think, was a really innovative offensive mind. Maybe he'd be a guy that you would consider at the head coaching position, but a lot of people didn't like him as a head coach. So my point being is what I love from Dave Canales as a potential option is his overall leader of men quality, right? He's a guy that brings the energy. He's a guy that I think genuinely connects with his players. And if people are going to say, hey, it's a lost cause, look at Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions. Being able to delegate is also a really strong thing that leadership needs to have the ability to do. And I think that Dave Canales is a guy that would definitely look to do that. I think that Dave Canales is a guy that should be considered as a head coaching candidate because of what he brings as a leader, as a communicator. I think that matters as a head coach. And I think Dave Canales certainly does have that. You do also have some other names. I know some people are going to bring up the recently fired offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills. I do definitely want to dive into that real quick. Let me see. I believe it's Ken Dorsey is his name. He's a guy who would be an interesting option. I think that he's definitely a young guy that can bring some impact. Same age as actually Dave Canales, 42 years old. You take a look at what he's been able to do. I mean, much like in the case of Ben Johnson, he's a guy that's done some good stuff offensively in the past. And again, I look at these guys, late 30s, early 40s, and they're still young enough to where they look into the nuances, into the new things going on around the NFL. I think that's important in a head coach, but also just being a good leader and a good communicator, I think is huge as well. Also, so whenever you get to like your Ken Dorseys, your Dave Canales, your Ben Johnson, late 30s, early 40s, I think that's a good age, right? I think it's a very good age. Another guy that I would kind of consider in that mix, but more so on the defensive side, Brian Flores, defensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings. That would be an interesting guy who the Bucs are familiar with. The Bucs are familiar with him. He'd be another interesting name as well on the defensive side, though. But point being, though, is that's the long scenario, right? Of like, let's say things don't go well. Todd Bowles gets fired. Who would they consider? Those are some of the top guys. You look at Ken Dorsey. You look at Dave Canales. You look at Ben Johnson. You look at Brian Flores. Those are four candidates that I think would be great for the Bucs to consider. I really do. But that's if things don't go well. What happens if things do go well? Well, firstly, in terms of going well, I mean, in a lot of people's minds, let's just say, for example, they finish with a 7-10 record. They finish with maybe 8-9, maybe 9-8. Heck, maybe the Tampa Bay Buccaneers even make the playoffs, right? What happens with that? Well, firstly, Todd Bowles isn't going anywhere, right? I think if the Bucs win 7 games, I still think he's probably safe. If they win 8 games, 9 games, and go to the playoffs, he ain't going anywhere. So then what happens? Well, whereas if Todd Bowles was gone, this guy probably wouldn't be around. At that point, do you keep Baker Mayfield? Another year in the offense, another year with Dave Canales, another year with Todd Bowles. I think that that's something would be considered. We've talked about it before, and I'll talk about it again. Baker Mayfield has not been playing bad this year. As bad, certainly not as bad as people thought he was going to play. And that certainly matters. That certainly matters. I think that if Baker looks good down the stretch here in these last 6 games and showcases just good ability, not turning the ball over, leading a pretty solid offense to be able to make some plays, that I think that if Todd Bowles stays, I think there's a good chance that Baker stays as well. I genuinely do believe that. So then you look to build around Baker. I think that that's a situation where if you're not going to be trying to build up a new situation, you're going to look to keep a guy like Mike Evans. You're going to be looking to keep a few more guys in there to try and stay competitive. Because at that point, you're still not a team that's trying to rebuild if you're keeping Todd Bowles. You're still not a team that is, looking to again, just rebuild fully, I guess I should say. If you're winning 8, 9 games and making the playoffs, no, you're not trying to rebuild in that situation. Now, if it went south, then yeah, at that point you're looking to get a new quarterback. At that point, you're looking at all avenues. If you're going to get rid of the head coach, you're going to be getting rid of, basically a lot of different people in that scenario. But if things do go well enough for Bowles, right? That's what I think would happen. I think that they would genuinely look to consider keeping Baker and kind of keeping continuity with this team and just looking to build a stronger team. And that's kind of what that's how the long-term future would be, where you look to retain some guys, you look to build around, and you look to build off of maybe an 8-9, 9-8 season. Again, that's if things do go well. Okay, that's the long-term future if things go well. So there's definitely an interesting dynamic there, right? If things go well, if things go bad, they can change a lot, right? And again, I've talked about it before. I'll talk about it again. It all goes back to those 6 games, right? Things go poorly, you're looking at a new head coach, a new regime, a lot of different things. New quarterbacks probably going to be thrown in there. A lot of different guys are going to be brought in. Do you keep Mike Evans at that point if things go poorly? You're probably not keeping Devin White at that point. You're probably not keeping a lot of different guys if you're getting rid of the coaching staff and you're bringing in a new group. You'd probably keep a guy like Antoine Field Jr. and some other guys there, but probably not much more if you actually want to rebuild. So that would be that. But aside from that, then you take a look at if things go okay, if things go well enough. People might not like it. But that's just kind of the pulse of the organization. That's kind of how things would go, in my opinion. It can be a subjective thing. It really can be. Just take a look at the chat real quick. The draft and free agency is going to be crucial. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that the draft and free agency is going to be crucial this upcoming season. And again, how the Bucs approach that is depending on how the immediate future goes. Some people are going to talk about being delusional. Half the fan base is delusional. And all the different types of things going on here in the chat. The cap, I believe the Bucs have around $50 million in the cap this year. So you can do a lot of different things with that. But again, it all depends on how the immediate future ends, right? With Bowles, with the coaching staff, with how this year ends. It's going to be a lot to determine that, right? It really is. O-line, defensive backs, quarterbacks are going to be concerns. Again, that it all depends on what happens, right? That's what it all depends on. So we'll see, folks. We'll see. Again, if they lose a lot of this, like this Colts game it needs to be a win. If they don't win the Colts game, you're looking at a tough situation. It's not the absolute end, but it's tough, right? It's a tough situation. I would say out of the next 3 games, let's just even take a look at that. The next 3 games, the Colts, Panthers, and Falcons. The Colts game is probably the one game you could afford to lose. If you lose to the Falcons, it's really not looking good for your season at all. I would say that much. If you lose to the Panthers, buddy, that's not good at all. That's not good at all. So we'll see, guys. Who would you say would realistically be the top candidates? Again, for me personally, and this is a very subjective thing, right? Guys can have different candidates. For me, 3 offensive guys I look at. Ken Dorsey, former offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills. I like Dave Canales a lot, the current offensive coordinator of the Bucs. And I think that Ben Johnson of the Detroit Lions are 3 guys that you would heavily consider. Defensively, Brian Flores of the Minnesota Vikings is a guy that I also think is a fantastic head coaching candidate. Those are just 4 guys off the top of my head that I feel like should be considered. Not even to say that they would be. Obviously, people are going to talk about Jim Harbaugh. I think that would be a guy who would heavily be considered. That would be wild. At that point, it's like, okay, I don't know what the future holds, man. You getting Jim Harbaugh, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on at that point. Maybe we could have a separate live stream here on Bleacher Report talking about that. But folks, that's taking a look at the immediate and the long-term futures of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, guys, a lot of different things can happen, and it can go a lot of different routes. It can result in Todd Bowles getting fired. If things don't go well, it can result in him sticking around and a lot of guys sticking around if things go okay to good. The rest of this season is going to matter a lot. I don't have to tell you guys that. You all know that. And it should be a pretty interesting situation. But guys, let me know your thoughts and opinions about everything that we talked about here today on the Bleacher Report app in the chat. Would love to get your guys' thoughts and opinions. Thank you so much to Bleacher Report for having me on for yet another live stream. What do you guys think the future is for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Do you think it's going to be good? Do you think it's going to be bad? Myself, personally, I think it has an opportunity to be good. But you got to start winning games now. Point blank, simple as that. So, again, thank you to Bleacher Report for bringing me on for yet another live stream. Guys, check out the rest of the Bleacher Report app. It's a great place to not just get everything for Tampa Bay Buccaneers content like you guys have watched here in this live stream, but all things NFL, all things just sports in general. Love Bleacher Report and what they do. They do a fantastic job. But anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching this video. As always, my name is James. I run the YouTube channel, MrBucsNation. Do a lot of live streams here on Bleacher Report as well. And as always, guys, I'll see you all in the next video or the next live stream here on the Bleacher Report app. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now. See you soon, and go Bucs.